Yep, thank you very much. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
All right, so thank you very much. I'm going to time myself. I have 10 minutes. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone, for having me. So this is my great honor. My first time attending this conference. By the way, today's, I am the second Hiroki. We already had the Dr. Ueda as on that first Hiroki. All right, so uh, what I'm going to talk about today is actually my hobby. My main research agenda these days are actually shifted more to the computational social science and complex systems and network science. But I try to talk about my personal hobby, which is the heterogeneous swarm simulation. And initially, I had no idea if this is relevant to embodied intelligence because there's no body in this work. There's no intelligence included. But after attending many talks yesterday and today, I feel comfortable. This is actually quite in a good match to this conference. Let's see how it goes. So collective behavior swarm has been studied for several decades already. The very famous Craig Reynolds Boyd system as one of the many examples. We look at the birds, the fish, and even cells, and they all show some collective behavior. And in the context of robotics, swarm has been studied, especially heterogeneous ones, to more like an application-oriented research agenda, like optimization of the routes, path findings or localization mapping. The SLAM, the spatial localization and mapping, is a very typical application for multiple robot systems. Search and rescue and the telecommunication application, etc. So most of the application of robotic swarms tend to be designed for the specific tasks. But one thing that I recently published a paper earlier this year in the Philosophical Transactions A, tried to advocate that the swarm system, especially heterogeneous one, can be a very great toolkit to explore the open-ended evolution. Yeah, just like what Mike Levine nicely reviewed, the diverse solution of morphological spaces. The swarm system can be a very good tool. So if you have any interest, please take a look at it. By the way, this special issue of the Royal Society A, this covers all kinds of swarm application, theoretical studies. I highly recommend you to take a look at this issue. Okay, so the toys I've been playing with for the last couple of decades is the so-called swarm chemistry. Again, it's nothing to do with chemistry. It's artificial chemistry. So we use the swarm individual as if they are atoms moving around, and then we mixed different kinds of swarm types. So here, this is what we call as a recipe. So there are this many quantities of this type of agent. So these are the kinetic parameters. And if you mix them together, they start to show very interesting behavior. This became already a classic example. I can just run one simulation. This is running live in my laptop. I hope this works. Yeah, here's one example. I hope you can see it. So there are two different chemical species, so to speak, mixed together in the same two-dimensional space. And then they have very limited amount of sensor. They can only sense the physical neighbor's average location velocity. That's all. And they don't even see type information. All the particles look the same to every single individuals. And yet they start to self-segregate because of kinetic property differences. And they start to show this kind of really circular behavior spontaneously without any controller. So another example here, this one will create, I hope that there's some oscillatory behaviors, again, from just the kinetic interaction between two different chemical species. And then if you simulate each type, independently, they never move. So each of the types, like this brown, reddish particles and these dark blue ones, they are immobile in itself. And this kind of movement happens only when they are blended together. So this is interesting, the property of the heterogeneous swarms that we have been studying this for quite some time. And in order to design the interesting pattern, we took the approach of called hyper-interactive evolutionary computation. Again, this is a very old work, nothing new here. So in this case, you see several different swarms randomly generated. You can just choose this and this. Okay, now this is the result of mixing 1 cup of flour and 1 cup of sugar. This is what happens. Maybe I'm going to add another ingredient here, etc. Maybe I can just double click and mutate. You see, I don't like this. I'm going to kill this, etc. Here. So this kind of evolutionary computation uses human users not as a fitness evaluator, but also we actually take the active evolutionary operations. so that we navigate the directions of evolutionary search. So this is what we propose as a hyper interactive evolutionary computation. And then result is very fascinating. These are kind of examples our students evolved by using this kind of toolkit. Again, each particle is just very simple swarm particles based on some different kinetic parameters, and they don't have an ability to sense the other agent's type or intention. And yet, just pure kinetic interactions start creating this kind of very complicated pattern. Sometimes this one looks like a biological organism with swinging heads. This one has a mechanistic, like a piston type of movement. Sometimes black one's going to be going behind, and then the red one's going to try to catch up, or maybe the other way around. But you see the very interesting patterns emerging from the pure kinetic interactions. Okay. And surprising thing is that these swarm systems are very robust against the dimensional differences. So it's very easy to implement a 3D version without changing any algorithms. And then these are the visualizations, how you design the two-dimensional pattern by using 2D version of swarm chemistry, and take the information and put it into a 3D version, and it almost always works as is. And this is quite counterintuitive because many of the complex system model, like a cell automata, any robotic system, they are heavily dependent on the spatial dimensions. But swarm system is the exception. I can just run some simulation. This is pretty much the same interactive simulator, but you can do the same design things like this and this mix. Okay. Today is not a good day. Usually just a couple clicks, you start to see something interesting, but maybe not today. Maybe you can just bring the additional swarm. Yeah, what happens if you blend this to this? Yeah, something like this. You see three-dimensional patterns can arise, and this uses exactly the same algorithm as a 2D version, and yet it works without any modification. This is great. Okay. And I know that I'm running out of time. I also want to mention that we actually try to make this entirely self-evolvable by introducing the recipe transmission between particles when they collide with some mutation. And we also applied some periodic environmental perturbations. So by having this kind of the basic ingredient of evolution, this happens. So these are all the automatically detected the best runs of the simulations. And then, even though I said evolution, there's nothing that is physically replicating. This is always the same number of particles. So I think in these simulations, we simulated 10,000 particles, no more, no less. Always in the space, you have 10,000 robots moving around. They are not dying, they are not reproducing. And the only evolution we see is basically the behavioral transmission from one particle to another when they collide based on some physics rules. And yet, you see this kind of very interesting higher order structures emerging spontaneously. And sometimes you see that they have this sensing ability to chase other organisms, try to eat, try to escape, try to stay away from the other mess. So there are lots of ecological observation and interpretation we can make as an external observer. And this is quite fun because there's really no individuals defined here, just like a cell automata. There's always 10,000 entities, always simulated the same amount of quantity. You see the only informational patterns. In this case, information is reflected to the spatial temporal movement. But this is what I try to make a connection to embodied intelligence. There are some intelligent, sensory motor coupling that are emerging in some of the higher level organisms. And yet this is all arising from the individual components. Okay, there's even the longer fancy movie. If you want to spend 5 minutes, we created this, swarm chemistry simulation art when John Houghton Conway, the proposer of the game of life cell automata, passed away at the beginning of 2020. He was killed by COVID. We use his name as his name string as a random seed, random number seed, and then this emergent property appeared from his name. So we don't have time to play it, but please check it out. Okay. And we also have the system to automatically harvest interesting patterns from the simulation. We have like dozens of thousands of the interesting patterns emerging from these kinds of evolutionary systems. And this Ignite, now sorry, I'm going to stop the sound. Okay. So swarm chemistry was proposed many years ago, but now if you go to the online, like Steam and the game, vending the system, there are so many much cooler systems available. And some of them actually inspired swarm chemistry, which I am very proud to say. But nowadays, the non-researchers produce a lot cooler, interesting, almost like distributed embodied intelligent systems by using particle systems. So this is the new trend in the artificial life inspired video game area. Anyway, so I will stop here. Basically, I just want to illustrate that those evolutionary collective systems can be a great example of distributed embodied intelligence, but there's absolutely no central information processing unit. It's all emergent. Thank you so much. I will stop here.
Thank you very much, Hiroki.
Is there any question?
Hiroki, so I don't see one yet, but I can also have one. So regarding the last slides you showed, it looks like there's some kind of a renaissance of, game of life or a life. So why do you think that is? Is it because of, I don't know, deep learning tools, or what makes this possible?
Deep learning tool, the GPUs is definitely one of the driving forces. Some of the cell automata recent models, they use the GPU. And actually, all of these examples use GPU. I think this one is particularly amazing. So they are actually developed by the IT professional. Those are the folks who actually design and implement a serious scientific software for high performance computing. And they spend their spare time to build this kind of stuff. There's definitely a correlation. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hiroki.